The man with the gentle handset was to 47 a.m., and the hospital hallways were quiet in that strange, heavy way that only happens after midnight. Machines beeped softly in the distance. Lights buzzed overhead, and the air smelled like bleach, metal, and something tired. The emergency room had slowed down, but the energy hadn't. Too many bodies had passed through that night: car crashes, heart attacks, a child with seizures, an elderly man who'd stopped breathing and then started again just as the sheet was being pulled over his face. Nurse Maren Santos leaned against the wall outside Trauma Bay 3, her legs shaking from hours of standing. Her dark hair was tied in a messy bun that had come undone hours ago, and her back screamed from the weight of pushing beds, lifting patients, and carrying more emotional pain than anyone should hold in one shift. Her right knee had been bothering her all night, but she hadn't said a word. Nurses didn't get to rest, they just kept moving. She closed her eyes for a second and breathed deep. That's when she heard the voice, "You okay?" Her eyes snapped open. A man was standing beside her, quiet, calm, a gentle expression on his face. At first, she didn't recognize him. He wore a hoodie, slightly damp from the misty rain outside, and simple jeans. No entourage, no spotlight. Then she saw the eyes. Soft, brown, familiar. "Wait," she whispered. "You're Keanu Reeves." He smiled just a little. "Yeah, but tonight, I'm just someone who wants to help." It had started an hour earlier. Keanu had been visiting an old friend in the hospital, someone he hadn't seen in years. The man was in stage for cancer, and the visit had been full of quiet, difficult conversations. After saying goodbye, Keanu decided to take the stairs down, not the elevator. Maybe he needed to clear his head. He wasn't used to hospitals. They held too many memories. But as he walked past the trauma ward, he saw her. A nurse, clearly exhausted, leaning against the wall like she might fall. Something about her made him stop. Not because she was beautiful, but because she looked invisible. The kind of invisible that happens when someone gives so much they forget they exist. Maren blinked. "You want to help, you're limping," Keanu said gently. "And I saw you push that bed with the kid who coded earlier. You've been on your feet for hours." She laughed weakly. "That's just a normal night." He looked around, then spotted a wheelchair by the corner. "Let me push you," he said. "What? I'm serious." She stared at him. "You're kidding." "I'm not. Sit down. Just for 5 minutes. Let me push you around the hall." She hesitated. Everything inside her screamed no. She was a nurse, strong, independent, not someone who needed help. But her knee was throbbing, and his face was kind. She sighed. "Fine, but only 5 minutes." He wheeled the chair closer, waited as she slowly lowered herself into it, and then began pushing. Not fast, not dramatic, just gently. They moved through the halls, past the quiet rooms, past sleeping patients and glowing monitors. And for the first time in her 12-hour shift, Maren laughed. "This is ridiculous," she said. "A little," he admitted. What are you even doing here?" He told her about his friend. How they used to play music together. How cancer had taken his hair, his voice, but not his sense of humor. "He made me promise to come see him before it was too late," Keanu said. "I almost didn't. Too busy, too tired, too afraid. But you came." "Yeah," he said, "because when someone needs you, you show up, even if it's messy, even if it hurts." Maren was quiet. She looked around at the sleeping hospital and whispered, "That's what nurses do every day." Keanu smiled. "I know. That's why I'm pushing this chair." They rounded a corner and paused near the east wing, where the windows overlooked the city. Maren stared out at the lights. "You ever feel like no one sees us?" she asked. "Like we do all this. We hold hands when people die. We clean blood off walls. We call families at 3 a.m. and try to say the right words. And then we go home, take a shower, cry in silence, and do it all again the next day." Keanu was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "My sister was a nurse." Maren turned sharply. "I didn't know that. Most people don't. She worked in pediatrics, gave her whole heart to those kids. She died in her 30s. Leukemia." Maren's voice softened. "I'm sorry." She used to say nurses are the only people who stand between chaos and kindness. Marin blinked back tears. She would've liked you, Keanu added. You have the same tired fire in your eyes. She looked down, then smiled. Thank you. You're welcome. After a few more quiet laps around the hall, Marin asked him to stop. I should get back. I still have 3 hours left. You sure you're okay? She nodded. Yeah, thank you. I don't even know what this was, but I think I needed it more than I realized. He helped her up gently, careful with her leg. Before she could walk away, he said, Can I do one more thing? Depends, she said, raising an eyebrow. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a pen. Then, grabbing a paper towel from the nearby supply cart, he wrote something down, folded it, handed it to her. Read it after your shift. And then he walked away. When the sun finally rose and the new nurses began their shift, Marin sat in the break room with her aching feet in a bucket of ice. She pulled the paper towel from her pocket and unfolded it. Written in messy but careful handwriting. You were seen tonight, not because you're famous, not because you're loud, but because you matter. Thank you for what you do. If the world had more people like you, we'd all be okay. At the bottom, he had drawn a tiny heart next to a signature. Marin stared at the note for a long time, and she cried. Not because she was tired, but because, for the first time in a long time, someone had reminded her that she was more than just a pair of hands in blue scrubs. She was a person, a hero in quiet shoes, and someone had seen her. What Marin didn't know, what no one knew, was that a hospital visitor had seen the whole thing, had filmed it, quietly, from a hallway bench. A video of Keanu Reeves pushing a nurse in a wheelchair at 3 a.m. No drama, no cameras. Just kindness. The video would go viral within 24 hours. But the story behind it, that was just beginning. The video that lit the world. By the time Marin arrived at the hospital the next evening for her shift, the energy in the building was different. Nurses gathered near the break room whispering. Orderlies glanced at her longer than usual. Even the security guard at the main entrance looked at her like he knew something she didn't. She had barely dropped her bag in her locker when one of the interns, Kyle, burst in with wide eyes and a phone clutched in his hand. Marin, he said, panting, you're trending. She blinked. What? He turned the phone toward her. The screen showed a grainy video. Hospital corridor, night vision security lighting. And there, clear as day, was Keanu Reeves pushing her in a wheelchair. Their quiet loop around the trauma wing. Their stop by the east window. Her smile. His soft nod. The caption read, Keanu Reeves pushes exhausted nurse during night shift. No press, no spotlight, just respect. Marin's heart skipped. Where did this come from? Visitor posted it, Kyle said. Said their father was in the room across the hall. They couldn't sleep. Saw the whole thing. Filmed it from their bench. Marin felt her throat tighten. Oh no. Oh yes. Kyle laughed. You're a national hero right now. Like, everywhere. She snatched the phone and scrolled through the comments. We need to protect this nurse at all costs. This is the real Keanu. This is the real hero. I've never cried watching someone push a wheelchair before. Respect to all nurses who go unseen. Thank you for reminding us. Marin sank onto the bench, stunned. The shift hadn't even started, and already her world had changed. Keanu woke up in his home the same morning to a dozen missed calls and a phone that wouldn't stop buzzing. His manager had left a voice message that said, What did you do this time? Because the internet just fell in love with you all over again. He groaned, rubbed his face, and opened his phone. The video was everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. Morning shows. The world had seen what was meant to be quiet. But for once, the attention didn't make him cringe. He watched the video alone in his kitchen. Saw Marin's tired smile. Heard the moment of laughter that echoed off the hallway walls. And then, he read the comments. Not about him. But about her. Hundreds of messages. From nurses, doctors, families of patients. My sister is a nurse. She comes home broken every night. No one sees her. I lost my dad during COVID. The nurse who held his hand is the strongest person I know. To all nurses, we see you now. Keanu sat down and stared at the screen for a long time. And then he made a decision. At the hospital, things spiraled fast. Local news reporters arrived by noon. By 3 p.m., two national outlets had requested interviews. Marin's supervisor, overwhelmed but supportive, tried to keep the chaos at bay. Marianne, however, didn't want the spotlight. "I didn't do anything," she said. "I sat in a chair. He did all the work. You showed the world what it means to be tired but still show up," her supervisor said. "That's not nothing." Still, Marin refused interviews. She didn't want her face on screens. She didn't want to be a viral story. She just wanted to be a nurse. But that night, something unexpected happened. Keanu came back. He walked in quietly, wearing the same hoodie from the night they met. No press, no camera crew, just him. The receptionist froze. "You're just visiting," he said gently. He waited until Marin came out of the break room, clearly flustered. "I told you this would happen," she said. "I didn't post the video." He replied, "I know, but I am glad people saw it." "Why?" He paused. "Because maybe now the world sees you." Marin looked down. "I didn't want attention." "Neither did I," he said. "But sometimes it finds you when the world is starving for something real." She sighed. "They're calling me the nurse who made Keanu cry." "I didn't cry. You did a little," she teased. He laughed. "Okay, maybe, but in my defense, you look like someone who'd been holding up the sky for too long." Marin smiled. "I think we both were." They walked the hallway again that night. This time side by side. Not in a wheelchair. Not in silence. Just walking. Talking. Laughing. A few nurses peeked out and watched, stunned. Some giggled. One even snapped a blurry photo and later posted it with the caption, "He came back." For her, by the next morning, the story had evolved. It wasn't just about a nurse and an actor. It was about dignity. Kindness. How something as simple as pushing a wheelchair could break the internet in all the right ways. Charities began using the video to launch fundraising campaigns for nurse relief. People donated anonymously. Celebrities spoke up. Politicians tweeted about increasing nurse support. And then came the letter, delivered in a plain envelope to Marin's hospital locker. No name on the outside. Inside was a handwritten note. "I watched that video 17 times. Not because of Keanu, but because of you. My mother died in a hospital last year. No one ever thanked the nurse who held her hand. So thank you for reminding me that kindness exists. That quiet strength is still possible. I'm naming my daughter Marin." Marin stared at it for a long time, then folded it gently and placed it in her wallet. Not for the world. Just for herself. That weekend, Keanu invited Marin to a small rooftop cafe, one he hadn't visited in years. They sat under string lights, the city blinking beneath them. "How's your leg?" he asked. "Better," she said. "The swelling's gone. The attention hasn't." He laughed. "I have a plan." "Oh, we give them something else to talk about." "Like what?" He looked out at the skyline. "We start something. Not for fame, not for press, for real." Marin tilted her head. "What kind of something?" "A foundation, a support circle. Call it whatever you want. Something to honor the people who hold us up when we're too tired to stand. Nurses, caregivers, people like you." Marin went quiet. Then she whispered, "You're serious?" "Completely." She smiled slowly. "Okay then. But only if we name it after your sister." His throat tightened. "You remembered?" "Of course I did." He raised his glass. "To the quiet heroes." She clinked hers against his. "To the ones who never asked to be seen." And somewhere, in the background, far from the noise, the world was already waiting for what would happen next. The Circle of Hands Foundation didn't start with a red carpet. It started with a handwritten list. Keanu and Marin sat across from each other at a worn wooden table in a sunlit studio above a quiet bookstore in West Hollywood. Outside, cars rolled by like normal, the world still buzzing, but inside, they wrote names on paper. Not sponsors, not executives, names of people who had been forgotten. Nurses, janitors, night shift workers, hospice aides, people who didn't make headlines, but held the world together one quiet moment at a time. They called it the Circle of Hands. Not an organization. Not a brand. A circle. because everyone deserved to be included, especially the ones no one noticed. The day the foundation quietly launched its website, Keanu posted one message across all his social platforms. For every person who pushes through pain to care for someone else, this is for you. The circle is yours. Hashtag Circle of Hands. The post included a single photo, Maren and Keanu, not posing, just sitting beside each other at that same wooden table, surrounded by notepads, teacups, and folded paper hearts. Within 24 hours, the site crashed from traffic. People didn't just donate. They told stories. Thousands of them. I'm a single mother working double shifts in oncology. This made me feel seen. My brother was a nurse. He passed from COVID. No one ever said thank you. This did. I'm not a caregiver, but I was cared for by strangers. This brought me to tears. Maren read every comment. Every name. She responded to the first 100 personally, until Keanu gently took her hand and said, "You don't have to hold everyone. I know," she said, "but they've been holding so much for so long. Someone has to notice." Meanwhile, the media couldn't get enough. They begged for interviews, magazine covers, exclusive rights to the story of the world's kindest man and the nurse who changed everything. But Keanu and Maren kept declining. They didn't want a spectacle. They wanted change. So they went to small communities instead. A nursing home in Fresno. A free clinic in New Orleans. A rural hospital in Montana. They didn't arrive with cameras. They brought coffee, books, meals, and listening ears. They sat with caregivers and asked one question over and over. What do you need that no one's giving you? And the answers came. Time, respect, someone to hold my hand at the end of the day. One night, in a quiet motel after a long day of travel, Maren stood at the bathroom mirror, brushing her hair. Keanu was lying on the bed behind her, flipping through a notebook full of scribbled foundation ideas. "You ever wonder what we're actually doing?" she asked. He looked up. "What do you mean?" "We're the people. We don't have millions. We're not experts. Why does it feel like we're trying to fix the world with a stapler and duct tape?" Keanu smiled. "Because it's better than pretending it isn't broken." She paused, then turned around. "I'm scared," she said quietly. "I didn't ask for any of this. The video, the press, even you." His expression didn't change, just softened. "Me neither," he said. "But I'm here, and so are you. Maybe that's all that matters." She sat beside him on the bed, the air between them filled with something that wasn't romantic, not yet. It was deeper, something built on mutual survival. "How long do you think this will last?" she asked. He leaned his head back against the wall. "I don't know. But if all we did was remind people that kindness still exists, then maybe that's enough." The next morning, Maren received a letter from a hospital in Ohio. Inside was a photo of a nurse named Tracy. In the photo, she sat in a break room alone, holding a coffee mug that read, "You are not invisible." The note said, "I was going to quit last week, but your story reached me just in time. Thank you for reminding me why I started." Maren cried when she read it. Not because it was sad, but because she finally understood. They weren't fixing the world, they were touching it. And sometimes that was more powerful. Weeks turned to months. The circle of hands became something bigger than either of them imagined. Students hosted fundraisers. Celebrities donated anonymously. Families wrote in with stories of how nurses had saved their lives emotionally, more than medically. One woman shared that her son had autism, and the only person who understood him was a hospital janitor who hummed to him at night. "People think heroes wear scrubs or badges," she wrote. "Sometimes they just hold a broom and a soft voice." Keanu read that one aloud to Maren at dinner. They didn't speak after. Just sat in silence. Letting the weight of it settle. But not everyone was supportive. Some media outlets accused them of being performative. A few critics said Keanu was using empathy as a brand. One op-ed asked, "How long before the actor gets bored and the nurse fades back into obscurity?" Maren didn't read those anymore, but Keanu did. And one night, after a particularly harsh article, he closed his laptop and walked outside, barefoot, into the cold night air. Maren followed, wrapping herself in a blanket. "Does it bother you?" she asked. He shook his head. "Not for me, for you." Why? Because they still think you're the side story. She stepped beside him. Maybe that's their mistake, not ours. He looked at her, and in that moment, something shifted. He reached for her hand, held it. Not like a confession, like a promise, a promise that this wasn't temporary. This wasn't about a viral moment, this was about building something lasting from the softest parts of themselves. The next morning, they received an unexpected message. The White House. They were being invited to speak at a national healthcare summit, not as guests, as keynote speakers. The invitation came with 5 words. Your story moved the nation. Maren stared at the letter in disbelief. What do we even say? She asked. Keanu smiled. The truth. That the strongest people are often the quietest, and sometimes all they need is a chair to sit in and someone to push it for a while. She laughed softly. You really are the poet between us, maybe, he said. But you're the reason the words matter. They didn't know it yet, but what would happen next in that summit room, in that moment of truth, would shake the foundation of how the world viewed caregivers, and how one tired nurse, pushed down a hallway by a quiet man, would become the symbol of something far greater than anyone ever imagined. The summit that changed the story. The National Healthcare Summit was held in Washington, D.C., inside a grand marble hall where polished floors reflected chandeliers, and podiums stood under soft golden spotlights. Usually, this room hosted senators and scholars, presidents and policy makers. But on this day, the most anticipated speakers were not politicians. They were a nurse and an actor, 2 people who never asked to be heard, but had moved the world. Without raising their voices, Maren stood behind the stage curtain. Her fingers curled into the hem of her dress. It was navy blue, simple, elegant, borrowed. She hated being looked at, hated when cameras followed her every blink. Behind her, she could hear the buzz of the press, the rustle of audience members adjusting their seats, and the voice of a host introducing the next segment. Please welcome Keanu Reeves and Nurse Maren Santos. The applause was loud. But it wasn't the sound that startled Maren. It was the sincerity in it. The people weren't clapping for fame. They were clapping because they cared. She felt a gentle hand touch her back. Keanu. Double quotes ready. He asked quietly. She looked up at him. No. He smiled. Good. Means your heart's still working. They walked out side by side. Maren didn't speak first. Keanu did. His voice was calm, almost like he was telling a bedtime story to a world that hadn't slept in years. 2 months ago, he began. I walked into a hospital late at night. I was there to visit a friend, someone I cared about who didn't have much time left. He paused. What I didn't expect was to meet someone who had even less time and was still giving it to others. He turned slightly toward Maren. I met her, sitting alone, knees aching, eyes tired, heart still open. Maren stepped forward now. Her voice wavered at first, but it steadied. I didn't think anyone noticed us, she said. Us nurses, the aides, the custodians, the overnight staff. We're the people who clean wounds and make beds and tell families when there's nothing more we can do. A hush fell over the room. But that night, she continued, someone did notice. He offered me a wheelchair, and in that moment, he gave me something more valuable than rest. He gave me dignity. You could hear a pin drop. Keanu continued. We started the circle of hands not because we wanted recognition, but because the world is full of people like Maren, and no one was clapping for them. Maren added, so we're changing that. Today isn't about us, it's about you. If you've ever held someone's hand at 3 a.m., if you've stayed late to clean someone else's tears off a floor, if you've missed birthdays, meals, and moments to show up for a stranger, this story is yours too. The crowd stood, not because they were told to, because they needed to. And for the first time, Maren didn't flinch from the attention, because it wasn't her attention. It was theirs. After the summit, something remarkable happened. Hospital administrators across the country launched new support programs for night shift nurses. CEOs of medical tech companies reached out to fund wellness spaces and trauma units. State governments proposed new grants for caregivers working in underserved areas. And more importantly, everyday people started showing up. Mothers brought baked goods to labor wards. High school students volunteered at senior care centers. Small towns organized nurse appreciation. Nights with open mic readings. Flowers and music. The world, for once, listened. Because the story had touched something deeper than sympathy. It had uncovered a quiet truth. We all need someone to push the chair sometimes. But not everyone was ready for the wave of kindness. Some media outlets tried to twist the story. Tabloids speculated if Keanu and Maren were secretly engaged. One reporter ran a headline, "Nurse turns into star. Is she leaving the bedside for the spotlight?" Maren read that article on her phone while sitting alone in her apartment. For a moment, she doubted herself. Was she still the same? Was she allowed to be seen without being accused of wanting attention? Keanu found her sitting on the floor later that night. He didn't say anything at first, just sat beside her and read the article over her shoulder. Then he closed the phone. "You're not a headline," he said, "but people are starting to treat me like one," she replied. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper. "What's this?" she asked. "A letter from someone who used to be invisible too." Maren unfolded it. It was written in careful handwriting. "Dear Maren, I work in a hospice in rural Texas. Last week, a young boy died in my arms. No one came to claim his body. I went home and cried on my kitchen floor. Then I watched your video, and I remembered that even the smallest kindness matters. So I went back to work the next day, and I held another hand. Thank you." See, Maren held the letter against her chest. And she cried. Not because she was breaking, but because she finally wasn't. They kept going. They visited a hospital in New Mexico where the only night nurse had been working 16 days in a row. They went to a school in Detroit where a janitor was also a grief counselor. Because the kids trusted her more than anyone else, they went to a refugee shelter in New Jersey where a woman who spoke no English sat with patients all night, just so they didn't die alone. And they told every one of those stories, not on TV. Not in tabloids, but on their foundation website. Under a section called the Unseen Lights. And people started submitting their own, some anonymous, some signed with trembling hands, each one a flicker of something too big to be forgotten. One night, while walking through a quiet park near the coast, Maren turned to Keanu and asked, "Do you think we'll ever be normal again?" He smiled. "Do you want it to be?" She thought for a moment. Then shook her head. "No, not if it means going back to being unseen." He stopped walking and took her hand, this time, not gently. Not carefully, but as someone who knew that what they were holding wasn't just love. It was purpose. "Maren," he said, "you were never meant to stay invisible, and maybe neither was I." They stood there in the breeze, to people who had come from opposite worlds, drawn together not by fame or accident but by the quiet ache of wanting to matter. And together, they had built something the world couldn't ignore anymore, not because they shouted. But because they whispered at the exact moment the world went quiet enough to listen. The kindness heard around the world. It was a rainy morning in Seoul when the hospital receptionist checked the mail and found a small envelope addressed, only with 3 words, "To the quiet nurse." Inside was a folded photo of Maren Santos, seated quietly beside a patient, her hands wrapped gently around his. Attached was a note in Korean, handwritten and slightly smudged from travel. "I saw her face in a video. My wife was a nurse. She died last year. People clapped for the doctors. No one remembered her name. Now they will. J.W.K. The message was reposted by a local journalist, then picked up by Korean television. Within 48 hours, similar letters began arriving in hospitals across Japan, Brazil, Australia, and France. People weren't just watching anymore. They were acting. Keanu and Maren's story had become something no one expected. It wasn't just a story about a tired nurse and a quiet actor. It had become a global signal flare, a reminder that somewhere, everywhere, someone is holding pain and still choosing kindness. Maren hadn't meant to change the world. She only wanted to rest her knee. Yet here she was, reading thousands of stories, sent to the circle of hands every week. She read one aloud to Keanu late one night in their hotel room in Switzerland. "My brother, a paramedic, never got to say goodbye to the woman he rescued. She died a week later. But now he knows someone out there thanks him for trying. Thank you for helping him breathe again. Keanu listened in silence, as he always did. Then he said, I think the world wasn't ready for our story, but maybe it needed it anyway. Marin looked at him. You really believe that? I do, he whispered. Because when someone shows kindness without asking for applause, they change everything. They had been invited to speak at the World Health Assembly in Geneva, a gathering of global leaders and medical organizations. Marin didn't want to go at first. They don't need me, she said. They have policy makers, doctors, heads of state. I'm just, Keanu cut her off gently. You're exactly who they need, because you're the person they forget to include. She agreed. Not because she wanted to speak, but because she wanted someone like her, someone unseen, overworked, and still standing to finally be heard. The auditorium in Geneva was massive. Rows of dignitaries, interpreters in glass booths. Press from every continent. Marin stood on the stage with Keanu beside her, both of them wearing matching pins. A tiny, open hand drawn by a 5-year-old child from Kansas who'd mailed it to them with a note that said, You helped my mom, who is a nurse. This hand is hers. The silence in the hall was heavy as Marin spoke. Not polished. Not rehearsed. Just real. I didn't save Keanu Reeves, she said. I sat down for 5 minutes because my legs were shaking, because I hadn't eaten, because I thought if I stood 1 more hour, I'd fall. She paused, and he pushed me. Not because I was weak, but because I was tired. She looked out over the crowd. How many people do you work with who are tired, who won't ask for help, who won't sit down unless someone makes them? The crowd didn't blink. Marin's voice cracked. The world needs to stop celebrating only the loud victories and start honoring the quiet endurance. Keanu took the mic next, his voice calm. We thought this story would last a week, a video, a few kind comments, but we were wrong. Because it turns out the world is starving for decency, for realness, and for people who choose kindness when no one's watching. He paused. What if we chose to see the unseen? What if we decided that quiet service mattered just as much as loud success? He looked at Marin. What if we built a world where pushing a chair was just as honorable as standing on a stage? The hall erupted in applause. And this time, Marin didn't flinch from it. She stood in it. Owned it. And let it wash over her like something earned, not for being perfect, but for being true. After the summit, the circle of hands was contacted by hospitals in over 30 countries, not asking for money, not asking for publicity. Just asking how to start their own version of the circle. One hospital in South Africa started a program called the Night Light, where staff were given 1 hour each shift to simply rest. No guilt, no rush. A clinic in northern Canada installed reflection corners, with photos and letters from patients posted to remind staff they mattered. A school in Brazil launched a caregiver storytime series, where students read real letters aloud from families who had been touched by unseen kindness. And at the center of it all, Keanu and Marin continued to walk side by side, never ahead of the others, never behind. Just together. But one morning, Marin received a call that shook her. Her mother had collapsed. A stroke. By the time she arrived at the hospital back home in Colorado, her mother was stable but speechless, confused, eyes clouded by silence. Marin sat by her bedside for hours. No cameras. No notes. No titles. Just a daughter, holding a trembling hand. Keanu flew in that night. Did in single quotes T say anything when he arrived. Just walked in, wrapped Marin in his arms, and sat beside her. She doesn't know me, Marin whispered. She knows you, Keanu replied. That's all that matters. They stayed for a week. Helping her mother recover, helping Marin remember that she didn't have to carry the world, even if she had once held it so well. Months later, Marin's mother regained her voice, and the first thing she said was, "You are always the strong one." Marin cried, not because it hurt. But because, for the first time, she believed it. They returned to Los Angeles in the fall. The foundation had grown larger than they imagined. They now had a team. A small office. A wall full of framed handwritten letters from strangers around the world. Keanu called it the gratitude wall. Maren called it the heart of the building. One letter, however, they kept on a special pedestal. A note from a young man who had been planning to end his life. I saw your video, and I thought, if someone can care about someone that deeply, maybe the world is still worth staying in. Thank you for not being loud. Thank you for being real. Beneath the note, Maren placed a small plaque. It read, for every life saved by simple kindness. That evening, Keanu and Maren stood on the hospital rooftop where it all began. The same place he first brought her coffee. Same place she first told him she was afraid of being seen. He turned to her, the city lights blinking behind him. You ever think about how weird this all is? He asked. Every day, I pushed a chair, he said, and the world called it a revolution. It was, she said, because you meant it. He took her hand. Then maybe we start the next one, she smiled. What's it going to look like? I don't know yet, he said. But if we build it with love, it'll last. They stood in silence for a while. The wind soft against their faces, the city humming beneath them, and the stars above quiet, distant, and still watching, just like the world, waiting for what they would do next. Asterisk the ripple that never stoppeth. Invitation came in a small white envelope. It was handwritten, with no official seal, no glittering logo, just 5 quiet words. Please come visit our town. Attached was a crayon drawing, done by a child, of a nurse pushing a patient in a wheelchair. Beneath the drawing were 2 stick figures holding hands. One wore scrubs. The other looked like a man with long hair and a beard. The envelope came from a small town in Wyoming. Population, just over 600. No press, no red carpets, no hospitals larger than a single hallway. But they had watched the video. They had followed the circle of hands, and they wanted Maren and Keanu to see what it meant to them. So they went. Quietly, no press release, no entourage, just Maren, Keanu, and a single carry-on bag each. The town welcomed them with homemade signs and potluck meals. Children ran through the fields. Elders shook their hands gently. The town nurse, Paula, who had worked 40 years without once being thanked, publicly broke down crying. When Maren hugged her, "You reminded me I'm still worth something," she whispered. Maren didn't let go. She didn't need to say anything. Back. Her eyes said it all. After dinner, the mayor invited them to the local school gym. "There's something we'd like to show you," he said. The gym was dimly lit, full of chairs and handmade decorations, paper hearts, photos of nurses, janitors, caregivers, letters from locals taped to the walls. But the center of the room held something even more powerful. A circle of empty chairs. 12 in all. Each one had a single white rose. The mayor stepped to the microphone. "We call this the kindness circle," he said. "Each chair represents someone in this town who carried someone else through their darkest day. We don't clap for them enough. We don't honor them. So tonight, we sit in silence and remember." And they did. For 12 full minutes, the room was silent. Then a young girl stood up and walked to Maren. She handed her a drawing, another crayon sketch. This one was Maren herself. But instead of being pushed, she was the one pushing. The girl whispered, "You saved people like my mom, and she saved me." Keanu wiped a tear. Maren knelt and hugged her. And that was when she understood. This wasn't about hospitals anymore. This was about life. About how everyday people saved each other again and again through food, through presence, through staying awake when no one else could. And about how being seen could save someone's soul, even if their body was already worn. The next day, Maren and Keanu sat on a bench outside the small clinic, staring at the mountains. In the distance, Keanu held her hand. "Do you ever think about how it all started?" he asked. "A wheelchair," she said. "A tired nurse, a quiet actor, and a moment no one planned." She nodded, then smiled. "Maybe the best things happen when we stop trying to be perfect." He looked at her. "You never were perfect, but you were always enough." They didn't kiss. They didn't need to. The world had tried to label their connection so many ways. Love story, miracle moment, viral fame, but none of that fit, because what they had was quieter. Stronger. A kind of love that wasn't about grand gestures but about pushing a chair when someone was too tired to stand. About showing up again and again, even When no one is watching. Especially then. Over the next few years, the Circle of Hands grew globally, not as a brand, but as a culture. Hospitals adopted the kindness circle ritual. 12 empty chairs, 12 minutes of reflection. Schools added compassion training to their curriculums, teaching children to spot burnout in others and offer support. Small towns erected memorials, not for generals or athletes, but for the nurse who stayed during the storm, the cook who fed the grieving, the neighbor who held hands after loss. And in Los Angeles, a small building was renamed the Marin Center for Caregiver Healing. It offered free therapy, massage, grief counseling, and spiritual support for those who gave their all to others. It was funded quietly. Anonymously, but everyone knew who was behind it. One morning, Marin stood in that very center, placing a new letter on the wall. It was from a hospice nurse in Manila. I used to think I was disposable, but now I sit in one of your circles every week, and I remember I am not invisible. I am someone's hero. She stepped back and felt Keanu's hand slip into hers from behind. How many stories now? He asked. Over 80,000, she replied. He exhaled slowly. You changed the world. She turned to him. No, we reminded the world what was always true. He smiled, then said, come on, you have one more shift today. Where? We're delivering breakfast to the overnight nurses at St. Joseph's. She chuckled. Still pushing carts and coffee trays. Hot, always. He said, and if you get tired, I'll push you too. She paused, looked at him with warm eyes. You already have. On the anniversary of the night everything began, a short video was released by the Circle of Hands. It wasn't polished. No dramatic music. Just black and white clips of caregivers around the world. Nurses tying their shoes. Janitors sweeping dark halls. A mother holding her daughters for drip. At the end, a simple message appeared on screen. Thank you for holding us up. When you fall, we will carry you too. It was viewed 64 million times in 2 weeks. But more importantly, it was felt. Keanu and Marin never chased attention. They never published a memoir, never sold their story to Hollywood. Instead, they built a world where ordinary people finally felt seen. Where being kind didn't require a spotlight, where holding someone's pain wasn't just noble, it was enough. And all of it began with a single act, a tired woman finally sitting down, and a man who didn't let her walk alone.